I'm Nick Terzo, and this is The Radical. This week's guest defines a legend and is one of the great rock vocalists of a generation. She and her band broke many barriers and charted over 20 top 40 hits. Through the decades, the band has continued to iterate and find their true authenticity. With multiple Grammy nominations and other awards, she has always exemplified that females can be badass rockers too. In addition, the Seattle of the 90s greatly benefited from her example, sage wisdom, and mentoring. I'm thrilled to have this conversation with Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee and heart singer, Ann Wilson. She and I will dive into the lows and the highs of sustaining a career over 4 decades. Coming up, my fascinating chat with Ann Wilson. Ann Wilson, welcome.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's more my honor than you even understand, I think. So, how are you adjusting to life not on a tour bus?
It took some doing, let me tell you, and because I've lived so much of my life in motion. This last year has been a real change, deep change, and super challenge. But I'm adjusting, I think. I just realized about 6 months ago that you can't just ride it. You have to do something, So I started writing songs and keeping really busy and reading and, things you don't have time to do when you're on tour bus.
Have you done any of this? I mean, have you been caught up into the live streaming world very much or not too much?
I have not been that much. I'm such an organic performer that it's really not, I don't know. My thing, when I get on stage, it's all about the interaction with the audience who are actually right there with you. So I've had a hard time getting any kind of a thrill out of live streams.
Makes perfect sense. So, and you did just release a new song called Tender Heart, yes?
Yes. It's
and did you write it?
I did. And yes, I am the tender heart. And it's not only a song about breakup, it's a broken heart. It's a song about the struggle between romance and reality.
Yeah, when I listened to it, I kind of applied it to kind of the whole universal world right now. It's funny because it's a personal song for you, but it felt so applicable to our current environment.
Absolutely.
On top of the fact that your vocal performance is just stunning again.
Well, thank you very much. I think that without that larger universal type meaning, I think the song, it's much more than just about a heartbreak. It's way more about what we're going through as a race right now. I think reality.
Yeah, it definitely felt more of a collective kind of, we're all in this, which is nice that it can translate to both.
Yeah, universal is good.
Yes, it is. And then last year you kind of did you do like a cover of a Steve Earle song? Was that kind of more an election kind of thing around what was going on? Or?
Well, I think that, the run up to the election, I guess about the 6 months or so before the election, things got so heated and so stressful and chaotic. And it was like this pig pile of all this conflicting emotions that all sides were feeling. And it struck me that I'd never in my lifetime seen our culture be so polarized. It was just ridiculous. It's like we didn't even know each other anymore. And so I thought that the Steve Earle song, which I've always loved, was right for that moment. It's a call for unity, and it's a call for, can we get out of this mess we're in and think higher? Can we just transcend for a minute and remember ourselves,
Yeah, and that song's called The Revolution Starts Now, right?
Yes.
That's the Steve Earle song. Yeah. No. and you did another lovely performance for sure.
Thank you.
Can I ask you, I mean, it's been years as a writer and an artist. Like what really, and you have to balance being a mom. I think it's sometimes a little more challenging for female artists to do all that. But how have you remained so vectored and so creative? And what's that determination and kind of drive toward that?
Well, all I can say really is that I was born this way, and it's just something that surfaced in me as a child. It started out with, like, say I liked a movie or something, I would just submerge in it and just, there's never any halfway with me. I had to just go into it head over heels and stay in it and work it and live it. So when I got to the point of wanting to be a musician, same thing happened. And, I just felt driven and drawn. It's instinctive with me.
And people say art kind of is like I don't know. They kind of say, you grab everything around you to kind of make your own art, right?
Yeah, yeah. And
I'm not talking about copyright infringement. I'm talking just about all different mediums and things.
Yeah. Although these days, with so much super saturation of songs and ideas and music out there, so hard not to have taken in someone else's idea through osmosis. There's so much you can do with 13 tones, It's
really true. And you feel like, talking of your childhood and stuff, since this is so ingrained, is kind of having been raised kind of more in an army family where you kind of moved around a bit as kids. Does that lend itself to the rock and roll nomadic lifestyle?
Yes, I know it does now. My dad was in the Marine Corps, and we were moving around like maybe at the least every 2 years. So we were always the new kids in school. We never had time to really make deep friendships. We lived in Taiwan and all over the place, East Coast, West Coast, everywhere. And so the family became our universe. And so inside of our family, that's where our stability was. So that just naturally fed over into Nancy and I going out and doing this thing together. We were kids, and one minute we were playing dolls in our room, then the next minute we were playing with horse statues, and then we were playing with guitars, and then, it just sort of morphed.
Yeah. Do you ever perceive your I mean, how do you perceive your kind of legacy and your contributions? I mean, did you ever think, oh, we're women breaking down this wall of rock and roll? I mean, or that just wasn't even factored in. It was just like, we're making music.
Yeah. Like I never once, especially in the early years, like when I was 16, 17, starting into music and being in bands, I never once had the objectivity, to go like, whoa, I'm a woman, kicking in the glass door, it just didn't exist like that back then anyway. I felt sort of, I didn't feel like a girl or a boy. I felt like a musician, So yeah.
Do you feel you were treated that way by like labels and radio stations back then?
No, I felt that, especially back then, they didn't share my that kind of thinking. They just saw me as a chick, and all the rules of the day applied when you dealt with chicks, which there's this kind of deep-seated sexism and indirect misogyny. Just, it's taken a long time to just get through that and leave it where, other people are just kind of leaving that on the side of the road and looking at what's really there.
Right. No, absolutely. And did you, look, you've done many iterations, right, with the band itself. I don't know what the current iteration is, as far as players and such, but between that, different record companies, I mean, did you ever felt like at some point you kind of lost kind of your way? I mean, because there was just too much kind of change going on?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because to say that you would keep a hold of a situation and lose your grasp on it because you're changing is confusing to me, because everything is always changing. And that includes the band, our bodies, everything. Constant state of change. So no, I never felt like I was losing track of some kind of it. I've always been kind of like always pushing it out. And every iteration of the band that I've been involved in, I've been completely into. It's frustrating when some people can't let go of the first lineup of Heart, for instance, because that's the one that was going when they first heard Magic Man, or when they first met their husband, or they were in their mother's belly or something like that. I heard Crazy on You, and so that's the band I want you to be in. Yeah, that's frustrating, because it's been 40 years of different iterations that have all been good.
Yeah, for sure. I think you've evolved nicely. And, I think people don't understand, your influence, or your, what would I say? Influence, is that maybe the word? In Seattle, with the young bands in the 90s, when I first met you, kind of what you meant to that community as a guide, as an example. I call you the grunge godmother. Yeah. It's my own thing. But, you were so good to all those bands, and they really respected you. And I think that's such a statement about, both your skills as an artist and you as a person. And because generationally, you might not see that happen.
Right. Totally not. I think on the topic of the grunge, so-called grunge era in Seattle, they hated that name, but during the 90s in Seattle, I think the thing that the biggest gift that I gave them personally is that I was a front person who stayed alive. I didn't succumb to drugs or suicide or OD or whatever, I just kind of stayed alive and just dealt with it. Nothing against the people who passed or their families or anything like that. But, when you see somebody just go through all this hard stuff and then come out the other end of it and still be in one piece, I mean, that's life affirming stuff.
Agreed. And, we both saw enough tragedy come out of that city.
Oh, yes.
It's been very painful.
It's the weather.
Yeah.
I mean, I say that as
only the weather.
Well, people very much resemble the environment they live in. And in Seattle, you've got gray, overcast dreariness for 9 or 10 months out of the year. It's always just kind of drizzling. And I think that's not the only reason, but there's a lot of depressed people there and everyone using happy lights and all that. I'm not really joking when I say it's the weather.
Right. No, that makes sense. And I mean, for all you gave, do you think being there during that time and being around these artists, I mean, did that infuse anything you were doing? Did you get to take away? I know you did some collaborations with certain guys in the 90s or the late 90s. What did you take away as an artist from watching these young, new movement, whatever it was called?
Yeah. I took away the idea of edge, I mean, the feeling of it's not only okay, but it's healthy to completely bitch about stuff in your songs. Just let it out, and just, if you're going to give someone the finger, just do it, don't suppress it. I like their whole culture of non-suppress or non-repression.
Yeah, they were definitely somewhat contrarian in that way.
Yeah, you think?
And did that like stand in? Did that stand in contrast to like kind of where you guys were as a band at that point? You know, because you started bringing in songs from Kelly and Steinberg and Bernie Taupin and Martin Page, and so did that kind of reset you guys in a way creatively?
Yeah, I think that by the time we got back to Seattle after the 80s, the big, Alone and These Dreams era was grinding to an end, and we came back to Seattle. We had wound down off of that, and we were back at ground zero. And so that kind of energy and intensity really was inspiring for me to get up again. It's kind of like surfing. I always say that the music industry is so much like surfing. You catch a wave, and if you can, you ride it all the way in, but then you got to go catch another one. You don't just set it and forget it.
Right. Well, you're world class then, if that's how you see it. You're a world class surfer.
Thank you.
For sure. So how do you and in the current world, where so much is kind of put on an artist now around, social media, we talked about live streaming, all these things that kind of distract from you really focusing on your ability as an artist or to focus on songwriting. It seems like there's so much more asked now.
Yeah.
Here you are on my podcast, for instance. There's more asked of you guys these days than there used to be. How do you deal with that? Are you enjoying social media? Do you find positives from it?
Yeah, I do. It really gives a person, an artist, a really good outlet to deal more directly with people who are listeners and watchers. In the past, like when I started in the 1970s, the only venue was radio and albums. And then in the 80s, here comes MTV. So suddenly you're being asked to sound good and be really cool and look amazing and be a dancer, maybe, and be an actor. And then, so now it's more like all those things aren't filtered through those filters anymore. You can go directly to people. You don't have to make a video and then give it to the record company and they look at it and maybe shake their head or maybe nod their head and then it gets out with their changes. Now it's very direct. I like that a lot.
Yeah, you guys own the distribution now, which is kind of great.
Yeah.
And I've noticed on Instagram, maybe you can speak to this. What is this Ask Ann thing that I saw pop up? What is that?
Yeah. Well,
I want to know about that. Yeah. I want to ask you.
Remember Dear Abby and Ann Landers and all those E. Jean Carroll?
Yes.
Well, that's what I'm going to launch. I'm just going to give people advice if they care to ask, because at my advanced age, I think I've gathered some insights. So and I love to just give advice and talk to people, give them my perspective on things. I just hope that it's more than just asking questions about art or asking questions about rock stuff. What I like is for people to ask me questions about their lives, stuff that they want another perspective on.
Right. Will this be on Instagram or where are you doing it?
Across social media, Instagram, Facebook.
All platforms.
Yeah. And
that's awesome. And when is your first one? When's it launching?
I think it's let's see. I'd have to look at the thing again. It's within the week, I think. And
okay.
And we're just going to.
So it'll be launched when we do this.
Right. Yeah. So and we're just going to
when this show publishes.
Yeah, we're going to gather the first batch of questions, and I'll go through them and I'll answer the ones that I am most inspired by. Put them out.
I love that. I would love to hear advice from you.
Okay, well, ask me something. Anything.
I'm going to ask you a question. So. No, I'm not going to be the first first person. So I get to ask the questions today. So I'm going to ask another question. Was there, like, in your career arc, and I'm sure there was, and over the decades, like a real seminal kind of radical moment that could have taken you in either direction? Or maybe it did take you in one of them, or let's say good or bad,
Yes.
that really would have changed the course of your career, or did?
Yes. And that moment was in 2015. Actually, it was in 2014 when I met the man who became my husband. And for the first time, I was hanging tightly with someone who didn't really give a damn about heart, and who didn't see me as Ann Wilson of heart, and we got so tight. And it was the first time I was ever able to just step out of that suit of clothes and just stand there vulnerable with someone. And he really encouraged me to write songs on my own and maybe do like a little solo acoustic tour just by myself. At that moment, Heart was kind of, back in 14, Heart was sort of on this treadmill of, shed shows and then make an album and then shed shows and make an album. And I didn't feel that I was doing anything creatively. I felt I was just sort of writing it down, And so he saw it. My husband saw that, Dean, and said, well, you could do something else besides that. Like, just for a while, you could go out and you could do your own thing and see where it takes you. So we formed this little like funky group called the Ann Wilson Thing, and or Taut, as we call it, and went out and played little clubs. I just hired a band of musos I knew, and we just went out and did stuff under the radar, real cheap, hardly got paid anything. Had to pay to play a lot of the time, which is unusual because when Heart gets paid like hundreds of thousands of bucks, and then the next night, Ann Wilson of Heart gets or Taut, the Ann Wilson Thing has to pay to play. I mean, you see the disparity there.
Yes.
But actually, it turned out to be the most fulfilling and creative thing and life-giving thing to me as an artist that I'd done ever. And that led to me coming back to Heart in later years and actually being way more awake and way more in touch with who I was. So I think that was a really good life-changing moment.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, and I know it's such a jolt, right?
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
Wait a minute. Maybe this isn't such a good idea, but
right, yeah.
I mean, for fans, it had to be fantastic just to see you in a setting like that. I mean,
yeah, but there were
awesome.
There were a lot of people around Heart that were going, "Don't do that! Don't do that! You're going to take the spotlight off of Heart, and it's just going to sort of dilute everything that we worked for." And that didn't happen because the 2019 tour of Heart was the biggest one ever in terms of crowds and success and reviews and everything. So it was great.
Well, I think people are more, as fans or music fans, I think they're more pliable, with different iterations of, you guys doing solo, doing the band. I don't think it's that
I think they are
crushing,
too.
And it proved it wasn't. So.
I think they are too. And it gives them more stuff to line up with. Like some people liked Nancy's Road Case Royale, and some people liked the Ann Wilson Thing, and they didn't fight among themselves, but they felt which one they liked the best. And then when Heart comes, they all get together, and it's actually a cool thing. It gives them more stuff to contemplate.
So, well, and I have to ask you, and I know you've addressed this before, but I'm just curious. I mean, when you did the Kennedy Center honors with the Led Zeppelin with Stairway to Heaven, I mean, what was that? And I know you've probably spoken about this, and I hate to bring up something from that far back, but I just thought the performance was just so stunning, regardless of Led Zeppelin's reaction, which is lovely. I'm sure
it
floored them too. It did. What was that like for you? I mean, you had to be a bundle of nerves. How do you do that?
Yeah, well, that night, when I look back on that, it was kind of like I see it through this kind of dreamlike glade. Ouch! I'm sorry. One of the puppies is biting my foot.
Oh, careful. It's all good.
Yeah, like I look back on the Kennedy Center honors, and it's dreamlike, and I remember being kind of overwhelmed backstage because of who all was running around back there. Led Zeppelin was only one of the people being honored that night. There was Dustin Hoffman and Buddy Guy and all kinds of people being honored. So all these luminaries who were taking part in those tributes were running around backstage. And, you just run into Yo-Yo Ma, you run into David Letterman, you run into, Stephen Colbert, and you go and you meet the Obamas and all this stuff. And so it's just like really a big, overwhelming thing. But then when it came time to actually go on stage, I think that the only nerves I had were probably in the first 10 minutes before we actually walked on. And thank goodness I caught myself and went, no, we're not going to, this isn't about you. This isn't about me. This is about them. So don't get carried away with nerves. So I just kind of tried to focus and use some of my entry-level meditational techniques and just sort of chill and then wait till after the performance and then freak out, which both Nancy and I did. But it was beautiful. It was just a beautiful.
I mean, was it?
Yeah, it was beautiful.
Yeah, you definitely, go ahead.
The arrangement, the production was thrilling to be a part of. It was like a cast of thousands, and everything just went smooth. We only had like a couple of hours rehearsal the day before and then earlier that day. And we'd been to the White House and all this kind of stuff the same day. So it was, by the time we actually got on stage and were doing it, I think I was wide open to it. And just really floating on this kind of warm bath of how beautiful that song is. Yeah, I'll never forget it. It was a beautiful moment.
It's a challenge to come out, unlike your own shows where there's that energy the minute you guys come out. Is it a little different to be in a room like that where it's probably a little quiet at the beginning?
Yes.
Does that unnerve you, or you were just...
Yeah. It didn't unnerve me, but because I was... Like I've sung in choirs before and I've sung in situations that were more classical. So I just took it like that. This is a legit house. This is like an opera house. This is not a rock venue, and just sort of take a hold and control the moment and then just let it flow. It was beautiful.
It was. I think that's maybe even an understatement. So, for sure.
Well, and we had 7 minutes up there. So the 7 minutes that seems like a lifetime, Anyway.
For those type of shows, though, 7 minutes almost is a lifetime, right? Because most performances are like 3 minutes.
And they actually edited one of the verses out of Stairway to Heaven because it was going to be on TV. And they had timed it by a stopwatch. This is how much time we have for Stairway to Heaven, and then we got to go to a commercial, So, blasphemy.
Unbelievable. Yeah. So is there anything right now that, do you still listen to a lot of music? Do you try to stay kind of up to speed? Are there things you really like right now that you've heard?
Well, the stuff I listen to at home isn't much like what's being played on Spotify or on popular music platforms. Like I'm way into music from across all eras, and I'm into world music, and I'm into Robert Fripp and mouth music, and like different kind of spiritual, Indian spiritual type drone music. I love Buena Vista Social Club. It's just all different kinds of things. Daniel Castro, Chris Whitley.
Yeah. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Chris Whitley. Good old Chris Whitley. So I wanted to kind of ask, I mean, it's an honor. You guys actually got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We all know that's like threading a needle, for sure, for any artist.
It is.
What did that mean? What did that mean to you? I mean, I would assume, some of the meaning that's going out, and I think some of the Grammys are with this next generation, but what did that mean to you as an artist?
Well, as an artist, I think that's what meant the most, that we would be, we'd be honored for our contribution creatively. If it was just how many records had been sold or how many years you've managed to stay alive and show up at gigs, that's not that meaningful. But it's kind of like getting a PhD in a way, or getting some kind of degree where, you've actually contributed something original to the culture. And that's what it meant to me. So yeah, I was honored. At first I thought, like some of the other punks that have been inducted into the Rock Hall, I thought, yeah, I don't care about this at all, But then I got up there and it was quite an honor.
Yeah. You're showing your Seattle side there for a minute. Watch out.
Right. Yeah.
So what's upcoming for you, like musically? Like, what can we expect? Is there tours coming once this ends? Is there new solo music? What's up for you?
Both, all of the above. Heart is, we've got this big offer on the table to go out and do a Heart tour as soon as it's possible to do tours. So that's a reality. But who knows? It's when, because I, for one, wouldn't want to be responsible to jump the gun and conduct some kind of super spreader tour. So that's where that is.
Right.
And personally, I've been writing songs the last 6 or 8 months, and I've got a bunch of songs. I've already recorded 4 of them, and I'm going down to Muscle Shoals here in a few weeks to record 4 more. And then after those are ready, I'm going to just drop them one by one, and then over the next year. And so by the time the year is done and we're all still in quarantine here, I may have enough for some kind of compilation, and I'll put that out. But I'm not interested in just like banging together an album now and ramming it down people's throats. I want to just one by one give them a chance to sample each song individually.
So you've adapted to this track by track thing.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, I would think it'd be more interesting than working, the old traditional way where you worked 6 months on a record or whatever, and then you had to wait, and the record company needed 3 months to put it out, and you could never get any real feedback as an artist for maybe like a year later.
No, it's
from fans.
Right. It's the great information black hole that happens. You spend like several months making an album, you pour all this money into it. Huge advances just get spent making those records, and all the people eating food at the studio and the cars and transport studio and all the expenses that eat up all that money, which is all recoupable, right? And then you put out the album and crickets, you don't hear anything. And it goes into the record company's world, and they decide which song they, as a group, think will hit people the best. And most of the time they're wrong because they're in such a bubble and disconnected from people that they don't know. So there goes your album. You put it in somebody else's hands and they misuse it and it's all over. So I like the more direct approach myself.
I mean, are you guys still, as a band, do you still have like a label arrangement, or do you just do it album by album now, or how do you guys work?
We do it album by album. And my 2 solo albums have been on 2 different record labels. And the last Heart record, was on a different label. So, most record companies most record companies, I think now, and unless you're hip hop or pop, that's how they do it. They don't want to take a big long chance. They just want to see what you can do one by one.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's not like you don't have a resume. So.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You're not an 18-year-old.
Right.
Guys, come on.
Right, yeah.
You don't have to take such cautious chances here.
Yeah. Hey, why can't you do more songs like the ones in your resume?
Boring.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, I'm going to wrap up. I thank you so much. I always am grateful to you because in the early part of my career with Alice in Chains, and you were kind of part of that world with us up there.
Yeah, definitely.
And you always made me feel welcome. And I'm always going to be grateful to that because I think the world of you as a person and as an artist.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Those guys are my brothers. And I'm glad that I could somehow help.
You did.
Be a force.
So you've helped many.
Great. Well, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Ann.
Okay.
I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening this week. To follow what's going on with this podcast, you can go to theradicalpod.com. Theradicalpod.com. You'll find show notes and past episodes and even a little swag there if you want a t-shirt or a hat. I would be honored if you'd subscribe at Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Till next week.